first scientific principle we're going to look at is psychology, particularly the self-determination theory of Ryan and Deci. They have three focuses in their theory. The first one is relatedness. So that's focusing on how someone has a sense of belonging or connectedness. Particularly, we're going to focus in on the PE lessons. And so how we can do this well in teachers to ensure that people have a high sense of relatedness, because we're going to get the most out of them in this way, is to make purposeful and intentional welcomes into class to each student. We can also use teaching strategies that involve students working in pairs or in small groups. So that could be models like peer teaching and student education. We could also, as teachers, create an encouraging environment and lead by example by being loud and quick to praise when students do things well as well. Interestingly though, a systematic review of SDT in physical education by White and Attell in 2021 showed that when activities were peer dominated, it greatly reduced people's sense of relatedness in the lesson who weren't in that dominating group of students, and then through that brought down the other two aspects as well. And so as teachers trying to pull cliques apart and get kids to interact with students that they also haven't spent a lot of time with as well would also help that peer dominance avoidance that's needed to make sure that that relatedness stays up high. The second aspect that they focus on is competence, or mastery of things. For us to give a good sense of this for students, would be able to give opportunities for success, but also to give meaningful feedback for points that they can actually work on to be able to continue that growth in competence in any given skill, but to also emphasize an encouragement and encourage continuous improvement, not just to reach a determined end goal by themselves, but actually continue improving themselves. And we can do this by purposely building a lesson structure that allows for that to happen. The third one we have is autonomy. So how do we get kids to wholeheartedly be in something and do something for themselves in these lessons? And so to do that, we can give students choices. They can choose different aspects of how games are run. They can choose to do warm-ups. We can also at times give them the opportunity to lead different parts of it as well. But then to also give feedback later on at lessons, what they enjoyed, what did they value in the lesson. And so these are things that we can do as teachers to really help build the psychology of students to be effective in the classroom. So our second scientific principle is neurology and skill development. We know that all people develop at different rates, but understanding a bit of neurology and skill development, particularly with the help of Pill in his 2015 play with purpose, we can begin to understand how we expect and our goals for teaching students, particularly in the kindergarten to year 4 years, of the skills we want them to have mastered, so they have a foundation to then be able to do and achieve more complex physical activities. And so some of these fundamental movement skills would include running, throwing, balancing, catching, hopping and kicking, and a few others as well. And in ways, teachers, we can help facilitate students to learn these and develop these skills is by giving them lots of practice. It's something that Pill brings up a lot. And a teaching model that has worked well in the past, though difficult to do sometimes for teachers, as the personalized system of instruction. And so this is when we get stations around a gym or the learning area where students can come up, they have a task in front of them that they need to achieve on a card. These tasks can be creative as we like, but ultimately what they're doing is they're particularly focusing on one or two of these fundamental movement skills. And when we focus on these through different activities, it's giving students lots of time to practice those fundamental skills and to develop them so that they have them mastered by the year 4 age, which is what we developmentally would like them at as we move forward. Another part of this teaching model is to be able to learn these things reciprocally, so together in pairs. This helps to continually further develop how these skills are learned. When they're done in pairs, we're learning from our peers at the same time as learning from ourselves. And so a key thing we want to do in these things is to get children to practice these fundamental skills, but also understanding where kids should be up to as they progress through these early years also helps us to understand early if there are some developmental disorders or problems in particular students, whether that means they just need a little bit more help to cross the line, or whether it is they need a little bit more assistance from further professionals. It's not something we as teachers can diagnose, but it's something we can flag so that we can give students the best possible chance of developing good fundamental movement skills to have a lifelong positive attitude towards exercise and health. Our third scientific principle is physiology. Physiological development during childhood and adolescence varies significantly and represents one of the most substantial periods of physical changes across our lifespans. So as educators, it's really essential that we understand these developmental changes and how they influence students' abilities and limitations and responses to exercise. Gilbert in 2005 categorises physiological development into two broad stages, being pre-puberty, which is generally between the ages of 5 to 12, and post-puberty. These stages are characterised by nodal differences in strength, endurance, coordination, and exercise capacities. Puberty in particular introduces significant changes hormonally and musculoskeletally, which enhance students' abilities to perform higher intensities of activity and also for longer as well. So when planning lessons, teachers must therefore consider how activities need to be adapted to meet these different developmental needs of students at different physiological stages. A key component of this is the inclusion of appropriate warm-ups and cool-downs. Although children are often capable of moving quickly into an activity, explicitly teaching the importance of preparing and recovering the body is critical. And so warm-ups assist in gradually increasing heart rate and blood flow, and then muscle readiness as well, while cool-downs help support recovery and reduce the likelihood of injury. Stretching practices are also an important consideration in these. Dynamic stretching is generally more appropriate during warm-ups as it prepares muscle and joints for movement, and then in contrast we use static stretching after, because prior to it can reduce muscle strength as well. Another important physiological consideration is the understanding of training zones and the cardiovascular response to exercise. Gilbert notes that prepubescent children, cardiovascular systems don't respond to the same way that post-pubescent adolescents do, particularly in the stress of exercise. And so as a result, students and teachers need to understand how heart rate and training intensities differ across these bits. So importantly, these concepts shouldn't be taught purely from a performative perspective, and like these videos show, rather an inquiry-based approach can encourage students to explore how their bodies respond to aerobic and anaerobic exercise and how training zones influence physical exertion and recovery. And in the anaerobic video, it shows students doing a short distance sprint and then waiting for the heart rate to return into a lower training zone before going again. The aerobic video shows something very similar, but a longer distance, and setting the aim of keeping their heart rates in a particular range. These approaches allow students to develop scientific understanding of their own bodies while promoting a lifelong physical activity and health literacy. In this next scientific principle, we are looking at biomechanics. We're going to look at two athletic throws, and we're going to analyse the individual's biomechanics to see how they can improve on their technique, but also what they've done well. And we do this as teachers to make sure we can teach kids to effectively throw and efficiently throw, but also to reduce the risk of injury as well. This first throw we're going to look at is a javelin throw just here. It is not a bad example of what a javelin throw should look like. However, there are a few things that we can pick apart from this example. So in this first screenshot, we can see a few things. One, the stance of the participant is really good. It's shoulder width apart. It's generating a good base of support from here. The thing that could be improved here, however, is the back leg. An increase of bend in the back leg would allow the participant to be able to generate more force, and as they rotate through their trunk, to be able to then pass that along into the javelin as well. And so an increased bend in the back leg would make the thrower more effective in this situation. Their grip is as good as possible given that it's a noodle. In this next screenshot, we see it's halfway through the throw. We're seeing a good example of trunk rotation. Shoulders have moved, the hips are starting to move through as well. And then we're also seeing that this is starting to transfer through into the arm as well. In this third and fourth screenshot, we get the final part of the throw. From the first one, we're seeing the arm has fully extended, so we've got that full transfer of force into the javelin, and then we're also seeing that's maintained a straight line from this behind shot as well, which is important for straight line direction of force. Our second athletic throw is discus. In this discus example, we see general good technique, but there are, of course, things that we can improve on to make this throw a bit more effective and reduce the risk of injury in their technique as well. So firstly, in this screenshot, we see an okay grip. It's hard to be perfect given that it's a plate, but it's not too bad. The thing we also saw in the video as well is that the participant was bobbing forwards and backwards rather than up and down, which is a no-no. And so they're already getting that transfer of energy and force in the right direction, so we can commend that. The last thing, just like the javelin, their back leg could be deeper, a bit of a bigger bend to be able to generate a bigger drive that then goes through the hips, shoulders, and then ultimately into the discus to be a more effective and efficient throw. In our second screenshot, we can see that we're getting the use of that full body with the rotation of the hips and the shoulders, and we're getting a good unwinding of that torso. And in our last screenshot here, we're seeing the final part of the throw. We're seeing the arm is the last thing. All the force has been generated through the legs, hips, shoulders, and now into the arms. And we're getting a tall stance at the end as well, rather than something that was bent over. And so overall, not a bad discus throw. And so to wrap this all up, we're going to look at these scientific principles, but within the approach of a socio-cultural way of teaching. We're going to particularly look at Arnold's ideas of learning in, through, and about PE. And see how that tracks through those key principles. And so traditionally, PE has been heavily focused on that scientific and performance-based approaches, where now Ken Cliff in 2012 argued that a socio-cultural perspective shifts PE away from that focus, but then rather helps to encourage and recognize that students' experience of movement and health and their participation in it as well is actually shaped by the social and cultural influences around them as well. And so this means for quality HPE, we need to look at all of these scientific principles and how we can teach them in a way that is sociocultural minded. And so when we go to the psychology principle, we can get students to learn in PE by understanding how we develop motivation and engagement in physical activity. And they would learn that through building confidence and autonomy and their positive peer relationships. And then they would learn how and see how motivation affects participation and well-being as well. A great teaching model to use in this scenario would be the cooperative learning model. It would be highly effective as it helps students to collaborate, to develop that sense of belonging and peer support as well, which then directly aligns with those sociocultural focuses on relationships and inclusion as well. Another one would be the teaching personal and social responsibility model as well. When we look at the neurology and particularly that developmental coordination disorder, a sociocultural response would recognize that students have different moving abilities and may
at times experience exclusion and embarrassment in that PE setting. And so an inquiry-based teaching model and a peer teaching model as well would be an effective way, because that would then encourage students to understand movement differences, problem solve collaboratively, and develop empathy towards those diverse abilities. Physiology, students would and may participate in that aerobic and anaerobic activities in PE, but in the sense of through PE, they would be developing that resilience, that goal setting, and that self-awareness, which you could make quite personal as well. A game sense approach would be effective here, as it allows students to engage well and be included well, while also embedding that fitness learning and understanding of how their bodies respond physiologically to exercise. In biomechanics, then students analyse movement techniques and how to improve skills, but in a socio-cultural framework, would remind us that and not reduce the concept down to a perfect body or technique, but rather with a teaching model of peer teaching or cooperative learning, it would encourage supportive feedback, the growth in their communication, and a shared learning experience as well. And so overall, a socio-cultural perspective really strengthens that quality HPE lesson that we want to do, with that big emphasis on encouraging kids and allowing kids to develop good principles, good healthy attitudes for a long life of activity and health.